Hi, everyone. It's Andrew with the Alliance for Innovation Infrastructure, and the month of August is Energy Month, which means we're sitting down with industry professionals to talk about the energy resource relevant to their work. And today I am joined by the one and only Marla Barnes, Senior Director of Industry Collaboration for the National Hydropower Association. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. I'm very glad to be here, Andrew. Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, we want to amplify the importance of our nation's energy resources, what is responsible for powering our homes and, frankly, our daily lives. So, just to dive right in, my first question is, what do you do?
I work for the National Hydropower Association, which is the national trade association for the industry. So we really are focused on helping our 300 plus member organizations and all their employees really advocate for hydropower and really hydropower in all forms. We're also helping our members think about using water to generate electricity, using waters from tides or waves out in the ocean.
Oh,
So there's
wow.
lots of different ways you can do this using water to generate electricity. And then we also do a lot of work with our members to help them connect with one another, learn from one another, and inform the industry about what this technology is all about. For many years, people have harnessed water really for mechanical power in the beginning. When you think about grist mills, when they would use the power of the water to turn the water wheel that would provide mechanical power. So that's been going on for really centuries, right? So the idea with the waves and the tides is to generate electricity using, again, that power of the water, the mechanical power. And so you would put a device out there, let's say an underwater wind turbine, if you will, out in the ocean that would turn the mechanical parts of that device and then generate electricity using a generator that would bring the power either to shore or power something out in the ocean. Let's say a buoy that needs to light up to let ships know there's something out there.
Yeah.
It could use the electricity to power that buoy. So if you were just to develop sites that are out there, it could provide about 40% of the US's electricity needs. People are beginning to really think about deploying these devices, so you never know where the future might go.
On a very basic level, how would you define hydropower?
Any way that you're using water to turn some kind of mechanical device that would then turn a shaft that's connected to a generator to electrify that generator. This is a big pet peeve of mine. When they think about hydropower, they might think about big dams. Really, a dam is something that impounds water, and only 3% of the dams that are built in the United States have some power generating component.
Wow.
So there's lots of ways that water can be harnessed to generate electricity. So it doesn't always have to be associated with a dam. Thing that a lot of people don't know when they think, oh, every dam in the United States, of course, has hydropower, but not at all true. Only 3% of the 90,000 dams that are out there have some sort of hydropower generating component.
Wow, that's very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
What are the advantages and the challenges that come with hydropower?
I think one of the big advantages, it's one of the least cost ways of generating electricity in terms of being able to provide electricity quickly, efficiently, inexpensively. It's one of the best ways out there. The other thing that's a real advantage is its firming capability. So with hydropower, you can turn off and on the generation of electricity. So you can, in the mechanical device, close your wicket gate, stop that water from moving through there, and it's ready to go at a moment's notice. When you need that electricity, open that wicket gate, move the water through, turn the shaft, generate the electricity. So the idea of matching that capability with some of our more variable renewables, wind, solar, we definitely want those on the grid, but the sun doesn't always shine. the wind doesn't always blow. So we've got to have a renewable source that's able to firm up those variable renewables. So hydro is a perfect match for that in many, many places across the United States. The challenge, of course, is you're using a water resource, which is used for many other purposes. So this idea of multi-purpose use of water, you've got to make sure that not only are you using that water to generate electricity, but you're using it to supply homes for clean drinking water. You're using it to irrigate crops. You're using it for recreation. A lot of these impoundments are used for recreational activities. So there's a lot of complicated discussions about how do you most effectively use the water, who gets first choice on that. So it does make it a unique thing to do. You're not just generating the electricity, you're doing a whole lot of other things with that water.
The ocean has an endless supply of water. Harnessing that is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, what would you like the public to know?
So I think, one of the things that this 3% of dams is really important from a public standpoint. I think if you think about hydroelectric power, most people think of Hoover Dam or Grand Coulee, but there are really projects in all 50 states where we've got small hydro facilities built along a river. We've got the hydrokinetics, like I was talking about, where you'd put a little device in a river. It'd be kind of riverine underground. So there's a variety of different ways that hydroelectricity is being generated. So it's not just the big mammoth dams that people might have in their minds as they think about hydropower.
Oh, definitely. Considering all the different innovative ways that you could go about harnessing hydropower. Obviously, this is probably coming from a place of ignorance. I'm just curious. But what's the likelihood that you could use storm drains or sewer systems, I guess?
There's something that the Department of Energy has been looking into called conduit hydropower, and the idea of any civil infrastructure where there's water running through a pipe or a canal, that movement of the water could be captured to generate electricity. So, for example, like on a water supply system, you've already got the civil infrastructure in place with the pipelines. You're moving that water. A lot of times there's going to be some kind of drop because you need obviously head for that water to move down and create some momentum to turn a turbine at the base of wherever you're moving that water. So it's a perfect example. There's several municipalities throughout the U.S. who have added hydropower to their municipal water systems. And so that there's lots of opportunity for that as well, where hydro could be added to already existing infrastructure, which makes a lot of sense. Adding hydropower there is a great match.
Adding to existing infrastructure, what would you like the public to know based on the public's perception of, like wind energy and solar, creating solar farms? All that new infrastructure is taking up so much space, the materials being created to create it. What would you like the public to know in that regard of why hydropower is this almost like a hidden gem behind this?
It is like a hidden gem. That's exactly right. So the opportunity of just like working smarter, not necessarily harder, I think is where there's some great opportunity for hydropower. As I said before, 97% of the dams in the United States don't have a power component. So there's a lot of opportunity at these existing dams, either owned by the federal government, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, for example. There's great potential to go into those already existing facilities, already existing dams, and add a power component. So I think we could increase our renewable generation in this country by just, being smart about what we're doing.
And taking advantage of
taking advantage of it. That's right. Even though hydro has been around for a long time, there's still really great, innovative ways that it can be applied. It takes all of us. It takes the community that lives around the water to embrace that idea and sort of educate ourselves about how that water is being used and how an additional use of the water could be added. And it's not either this way or this way. You can have fresh, flowing, clean water that's being used to generate electricity as well. And so I think, part of it is educating ourselves about what the reality is and what could be used out there.
What would you like policymakers and lawmakers to know when it comes to education?
I appreciate that so much, Andrew, because right now we have a couple of legislative priorities that we're working on in Congress. One of the big challenges for hydropower is the permitting side. And as we know about, there's lots of discussion right now in Congress about permitting reform. There needs to be some work in terms of streamlining the whole process for licensing and relicensing hydroelectric facilities. The owners of the facilities aren't the only ones that think that. NHA and its members have worked with a group out of Stanford University called the Uncommon Dialogue. And that program has brought together not only industry, but environmental conservation community groups, Indian tribes throughout the United States, people who have a stake in this whole licensing of hydropower. And they've sat down together and said, okay, what could we agree to in terms of reforming the licensing process? And together, those groups have put together a proposal of reform and have brought that forward to Congress. And so there's a bill going through Congress right now focused on those reforms. So for policymakers, what we'd like to ask them to do is take a look at this hydropower licensing reform legislation that's out there. Every day we're getting more support for that legislation. Right now it takes a long time, let's say 10 years, to get a license
Really?
for a hydro project. And that's crazy to take so long to get that done.
Yeah.
Not that it shouldn't be licensed and evaluated, but we need to increase the speed of that process, I think is so important. It just makes good common sense as you look at that process.
No, I agree. And I'll definitely be linking that below.
Great, thanks.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
One thing we haven't really talked about is pumped storage. And this is an interesting concept that back in the 60s, there were several pump storage projects built in the United States. What pumped storage is, it's moving the water from a lower reservoir or river up to a higher reservoir. At times when not much electricity is needed, you could use baseload power to pump that water up to the top of the reservoir. Then when we all wake up in the morning and we're trying to get ready for work and that peak load really increases for electricity use, you can release that water back down to the lower reservoir, run it through a turbine, generate electricity on the way down. That was a concept, made a lot of sense. About 36 of these projects were built in the United States and really are the backbone of our storage, electricity storage that we need today. Again, kind of back to that variable renewables. We need a way when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow, to be able to essentially store electricity and then release it when we need to. So right now there's a big focus on building more of these pump storage facilities. There's about 90 of them that have been proposed.
Wow.
The challenge is they're really expensive to build. So for a developer, the idea of tax incentives is really important for them. So that's something, again, that's kind of a renaissance that we're seeing with the Inflation Reduction Act that Congress passed in 2022. There is a 30% tax credit to build new pump storage projects. So If you think about taking 30% off the cost of building one of these, that's a huge incentive
That is.
to look at building new storage facilities. So I think we're going to hear more about that as we go forward. There's a lot of focus on innovation in that whole pump storage technology. Those projects were built 30 years ago. Lots has transpired since then. So there's great opportunity to apply innovation as developers look at building those new pump storage projects.
Geographically, where are these located predominantly?
Throughout the United States, but predominantly there's a lot of focus on building sites in the West, so Northwest, California, and then there's also some interest down in the Southeast, both Southern Company, and which is a big investor-owned utility in Georgia, and the Tennessee Valley. There's interest in the Southeast in looking at building new pump storage. So those are just two specific places. As you look at the 90 projects that are being proposed, they're spotted throughout the country. Anywhere where you've got an elevation and water, you can look at using hydropower.
Moving back to the challenges just really fast, what are some of the contributing factors to it taking 10 years? Talk a little bit more about that and the kind of things that arise challenge-wise to promoting hydropower as a greater energy resource than another.
There's lots of government entities involved in making decisions about the use of the water around a pump storage project. So you've got the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're the government agency that provides the license, but they're required by law to get input from state and federal resource agencies, a variety of stakeholders who private and public who have a stake in the use of the water. Bottom line, there's lots of voices in that process, but there's no certainty about when decisions have to be made once all those voices are heard. A process is good to get everybody's voice at the table, let's say, but there needs to be a time where you say, okay, this is when the decisions are going to be made, and some certainty in terms of the timeline. And so that's the challenge, I think, of the long times that it's taking to get those license decisions made. So many voices at the table without really a certainty of the decision making, some sort of schedule that everybody is following.
Yeah, thinking about longevity in a different way too, what is the longevity of the infrastructure?
Oh, it's we really call them forever assets. There are literally hundreds of projects that have been operating for 100 years or more and are still churning away. In fact, the National Hydropower Association organizes an annual conference every year for the industry. And this year it's in Ohio, in Cincinnati. There's a town about an hour away from Cincinnati that has a facility way back in the early 1900s. That facility is still generating electricity today for the city of Hamilton, Ohio. So it's a perfect example of how these assets really, they're built sustainably and will last forever. The equipment, sometimes you need to go in and rehab it or provide good maintenance, but they will really last for hundreds of years. Once they're built, generating electricity is very reasonable using a hydropower plant.
Would you like to talk about the impact on the environment?
Anytime you are using water for a particular purpose, you are going to have an impact. NHA is wanting to make sure that the work of our members is really highlighted. We have a program, for example, called the Outstanding Stewards of America's Waters. And every year we try to recognize those companies that are going above and beyond to really make a difference in terms of affecting what they're doing in a positive way, of trying to do something about those impacts. Yes, hydropower does have an effect on the environment, sometimes for the good, just as I'm saying with these companies that are making improvements for, let's say, fish passage or water quality or providing recreational activities in a particular area. I think the challenge of impacts It's important, again, for the public to understand everything that we do in our society does have an impact.
Yes.
It's how are we thinking about what we are doing with that impact, how we are mitigating it, how are we keeping our planet better for the next generation. Part of progress and part of innovation is doing things, and when they do have an impact, paying attention to that and seeing what you can do to mitigate those.
No, I love it. From the get-go, when you're talking about how hydropower prioritizes how innovation looks at something, how it can, create something new out of it. But thank you so much for talking with us today, Marla.
You are very welcome, Andrew. I enjoyed it. It was our pleasure.
Thank you. You guys can
Uh-huh.
visit aii.org/energy month to learn more.